Good evening and welcome to SIMRACERS Revival. Welcome to Monza. We are here at the Temple of Speed for the F1 1984 Masters Championship. And we are coming to a close, or the championship is coming to a close. It's revving up for a very interesting finale, I would say. But I'll get to the points in a minute. So we're here at Monza. I am your host, Neil Wood, and I'm going to be taking you through 42 laps of Monza, the 1986 layout. Very bumpy, very high curbs, but it's a very interesting track in this configuration. So historic track, historic cars. I'm looking forward to this, as I always am. So, if you haven't been with us before, where have you been? The championship is rounding down. We are on round 6 of 7. And the championship is very, very close. In fact, the championship is tied up at the moment. So if we look at the point scores, we have Becky Ely-Clark and Michael Stoy on 66 points each after 6 rounds. So they've been swapping places all the way through this championship. I think if Ely-Clark was here for round 1, she could possibly be in the lead by now, but Vito Martino in third and Sal Villaggio, I always get that name a little bit wrong, I apologise, are not far behind, so 60 points and 58 points respectively, with Johan Neuenhoff on 42, not far behind that either. Giletti on 34, then we have Matthias Bogle on 28, Josef Müller on 22, and Schuerkamp on 20, with Ronnie Ruger down the bottom with the 16. So we are using historic rules for this championship. You do have to complete 50% of the race distance to be able to score. And I believe scores go all the way down to, I think it's 12th place, 20 for a win, 16 for second, and 14 for third. So we're looking at, we only have to be in the top 5 to have any chance of staying in the top 5 in the championship. Consistency is the absolute key in this championship. But if we look at the schedule so far, we have been 6 rounds all over the world. Started off in Jarama. We didn't unfortunately broadcast that one, but Buenos Aires was our first round in Argentina. Then we headed to Monaco, Silverstone, and then the long straights of Hockenheim, and we're now at Monza, the Temple of Speed, as it says, and it is going to be about a month until we head to Adelaide, so we've got a bit of a wait. I don't believe the championship is actually going to be decided tonight, unless something really dramatic happens. But in terms of what the championship is involved with, we are using the F1 1984 cars. So if you don't know much about the 1984 cars, they do have 2 engine modes, qualification and race mode, which means they can turn the wick up in qualification. Gives you a bit more turbo, a bit more speed, but the fuel efficiency is not so great. And then they can turn the engine down in the race. Fuel efficiency is a little better, but speed not so much. So drivers have got a little bit of tweaking that they can do in the cockpit. So what they've also got available to them, amongst the engine modes, they do have the ability to use soft, medium and hard tyres. Now, I have put wet down there, but we aren't really expecting any wet weather at this point in time. I'll have to check the weather a bit later on, or the forecast, to see if there is weather expected, but I haven't spotted any so far. So we have seen a variety of strategy. A lot of their drivers have taken medium tyres so far. So there may be a couple of drivers that have been tempted by the soft tyre, or even tempted by the hard tyre, but most stick with the medium. So our drivers are out on track for practice at the moment, so we might as well join them and see what kind of times they are putting in. So as I say, this is the 1986 layout of Monza. And the 1986 layout of Monza has very, very high curbs It's currently used for Formula 1. It only took a break in 1980 and then was back for 1981. So it's been on the F1 calendar since 1950 up to the present day. So Ely Clark just taking a little bit of a sighter lap around the parabolica there. So the car wiggling away up the straight. There's due to be some good drafting battles up that main straight, I believe. Looking forward to that, but they've got a hard stop down to the Rettifilio chicane. So topping the times at the moment, it is Andy Schremser in the McLaren with a 125.1. So what we're looking out for tonight specifically is the top 4 in the championship, within 6 points of each other. So Ely Clark, Martino. If I just look at my cheat sheet, Michael Stoy and Marco Salvagio. I will get that name right. So those are the main championship contenders at the moment. Now, as I said, level on points at the top between Michael Stoy and Becky Ely Clark. Now, championship could be decided, but Michael Stoy and Vito Martino, probably Salvagio would have to have a non-finish in order for Ely Clark to take the championship. She would have to take the win as well. So I don't think that would be a very rare occurrence that the top 3 or the top 4 in the championship would crash out. But as I say, the drivers do have to finish 50% of the race in order to score points. So all the way down to 12th. So if we double check the regulations to see if there's anything I have missed. So it is 42 laps around here. We are due to start the race in about... So it's 18:24 now. So warm-up is at 18:55. So qualifications should be starting in about 5 minutes. And it's a 25-minute qualification session, so there's a lot of time for our drivers to get a lap in. And we have seen around in this championship that some drivers like to go out and get some clean air. Other drivers like a drafting partner. Now, I don't know if a drafting partner around this track is beneficial. But one characteristic of this particular layout of the track, so back in the 80s they did have higher curbs, and these cars do get unsettled by them. So we did see at the last round in Hockenheim that track did have some higher curbs as well, and there was a few drivers that got caught out. As we see Andy Schremser coming out on cold tyres and getting caught out by either the braking distance or just colliding with that curb. You see how much it unsettles the car. So drivers have got to be very, very careful how they negotiate this circuit. So this layout was used between 1979 and if I've got my I think it was 1993. It was 1991, I believe. So it's a long time for this track layout to be actually used in modern day racing. I'm just going to double check myself. They did have lots of different layouts before this, particularly in the 70s when they were fiddling around with chicanes and slowing the cars down a little because they got a little fast. Yeah, so in fact it could be 1976 to 93. But if you don't know Monza in general, and where have you been if you don't know Monza, it did have banking back in the day. and part of this circuit. You can see the banking just there in the background. But they do go underneath the banking when they go down the back straight. Kind of hard to believe that any car would have been able to negotiate that banking back in the day. So Galetti in the ATS just coming through the Parabolica. Matthias Bogle in the Lotus Renault. In fact, technically Ely Clark's teammate. Ely Clark runs the Lotus Renault also. So looking down the list, let's have a look. Matthias Bogle. Best finish of the race so far is a third place. That was in the third round at Monaco. Andy Schremser in McLaren. Andy Schremser has unfortunately had 2 DNFs. He had a DNF in the first round and a DNF at Monza in the third round. But his last 2 finishes, he's been able to finish in 7th and 8th. Galetti has taken part in 4 rounds so far. Unfortunately, in the second round, came to grief with suspension damage. He may be one of the drivers that came to grief on the grid, because we did have a big start line accident at Buenos Aires. A couple of drivers getting caught out when a driver speared to one side and hit the pit wall. So over to qualification we go. So 25 minutes these drivers have a chance to put in a lap. We have to see what are the tactics for these drivers. Do they go out with a drafting partner, or do they in fact want to go out alone? So it looks like we've got a lot of drivers queuing up at the end of pit lane. They want to get as many laps in as they can. Josef Müller is the first out on track in the Benetton. It's overtaken straight away by one of the Renaults. So last round at Hockenheim, the race went swimmingly for Ely Clark. Came away with the win, which has done well for her championship chances. Her nearest championship contenders had a bit of a nightmare. Although Vito Martino, who's company level with her in the championship, was able to come back to a 4th place and get 12 points out of that race, but he got knocked down to near enough the back of the grid, got involved in a first chicane accident. So Bogle letting a couple of drivers pass, wanting a little bit of space on the track. So a couple of different tactics at play there. That Renault driver you can see in front, possibly Neuenhoff, wanting to get some clear air and wanting to get this over with, or as many laps in as possible. So Bogle moving those tyres out of the final corner, coming through the Parabolica and up the main straight towards the Rettifilo chicane. Rettifilo chicane in 1986. It's basically 2 chicanes in one. So head left, bump over the curbs, and left and then right. There's a slight bump on the exit of the Rettifilo chicane, which does unsettle the car. And through the Curve Grande they go. So Sal Villaggio, the Renault with the red flashes on the rear wing. Letty coming through the first of the Lesmos. Second one is a little faster than the first. and down the back straight. Now we see if we stick with this camera angle, we can see that bridge there. That is where the banking was, or still is rather. They don't use it anymore, but that is where they go underneath the banking. So Alvalaggio coming down the back straight into the tight entry to Parabolica. You've got to get it exactly right because they use that speed all the way down the main straight. So no times on the board just yet. As I say that, Alvalaggio goes across the line 123.85. Martino not far behind, just under 3/10. Just after setting that provisional pole, so Alvalaggio watch it with rejoining the track. So probably surprised himself after setting that provisional pole. Surprised himself right off the track. So Andy Shrimps are currently in 6th place, coming across the line, and will go provisional 3rd. That's nearly 8/10 of a second to find. The track does get warmer, and the drivers do seem to go out for long runs, and the times just get quicker and quicker and quicker. So expect that time of provisional foal to come down. So Michael Stoy in with a chance of the championship for the last 2 races. So penultimate round. You don't want to drop any scores tonight because it may mean the end of your championship run, or at least it will make things harder into the final round. So we're going from the Temple of Speed to the street circuit of Adelaide. So that is the traditional final round of Formula 1 back in the day, back in the early 90s. Alvalaggio still in 3rd place, 9/10 of a second. So championship challenger Ely Clark is still yet to set the time. Stoy getting a nice draft from a Ferrari that moves out of the way. Doesn't want to get in the way of Stoy on a fast lap. Martino, what can Martino do? Put in a 122.8, so he goes provisional pole. So you see the times are coming down thick and fast in the first 5 minutes of this qualification session. Camp goes up to 6th. So the times are close. Underneath the provisional pole, but I think it takes a while for a few drivers just to warm up a little. They want to get their tyres as warm as possible. Fuel load to come down a bit. As Martino comes back into the pits. Now it is one of the rules to do with this series that drivers will have to come into the pits for their in-lap. If you crash out on circuit and you can't get back to your pit, that is your qualification over with. So drivers need to be used to doing an out-lap, a fast lap and an in-lap. That is a Williams going a bit slowly. That is Borveg. So perhaps Borveg is just getting out of the way of some faster drivers while he warms up on his out-lap. So Stoy looks like purple in the first sector. Still 8/10 away from provisional pole, but I'm sure that's going to come down a bit in the laps to come. So 122.8 to beat. So braking hard down into the Parabolica. Hug that white line and then try and get on the power as fast as possible. You see how bumpy it is on the exit there. Make sure you don't cut the white line on the main straight. So Alvalaggio again having a little bit of a spin. Pushing a bit, maybe a bit too hard. Some of the faster corners, maybe he's taking off a bit more rear wing than the other drivers. Because you want to run as low downforce as possible in that. So be careful with engine temps as well. So maybe to get going again, he get the red line a bit too much and got that engine a bit too hot. So Stoy goes to the top of the time chips, 122.4. Martino has now got 4 tenths or 4.5 tenths to find. Ely Clark has now popped up to third, 123.6. Salvalaggio in fourth, who's currently in the pits. And Galetti currently in fifth place. So time still tumbling down, just under 17 minutes to go. So is this going to be a little bit quicker for Stoy? He did a personal best in the first sector, fastest of all in the first sector. No improvement as he goes over the line. It's still provisional pole, 122.4. So Andy D slightly slower coming in to the pits. Now, you would expect that most of our drivers will be on soft tyres, but it seems that the balance for a lot of these drivers, they like the yellow medium. Only a couple of drivers that we can see on the list at the moment, Bogle and Bulveg, on soft tyres. Tyre life is not too great on the soft tyres. So Martino, personal best in the first sector, 31 dead. 31.0. And down to cut the beam for the second sector. So just across the beam. Looks like he might have a purple. Fastest of all in the second sector, 26.0. So all he has to do is come down the straight and get a good entry and exit to the Parabolica. So out the final turn he comes. How close can you get to provisional pole? So Martino comes across the line. He got a little bit closer, and it's now down to 2.5 tenths. But Michael Stoy still in provisional pole as it stands. So Schremser currently in 8th place. Possibly going to improve with personal bests in all sectors. Schremser goes up to 5th place at 1.6 seconds behind provisional pole, as we see Oliver Day in 13th place. Now, I don't think we've seen a lot of Oliver Day in recent. This is his first time back since the first 2 rounds. Unfortunately, he had an engine failure in the first round, and he did not start in the second. So Oliver Day, welcome back to the championship. So Martino, and again a purple sector in the second sector. Is this going to be an improvement? Trying to get on the throttle as hard as possible, but you don't want to run too wide, because if you run too wide on that exit, it's just going to suck you into the Armco barrier. So Martino goes provisional pole, as we see Schremser again all out of shape coming onto the back straight. So 0.05 of a second. That is very, very close. There's no, literally hardly anything between them. So Martino lining up on the front row, taking a lot of curve on that outside. Seems it didn't really affect him. Down the back straight underneath the banking. Through the Ascari chicane we come. So bumping over the curves a little bit. Maybe this is a warm-up lap. Doesn't look like he's pushing too much. Or perhaps this might be an in-lap. So just under 13 minutes to go. It's Martino in provisional pole, Stoy second, Ely Clark in third, Salvalaggio in fourth, and Bogle in fifth. It is indeed an in-lap. So I think we're possibly going to see when our drivers are pushing in the race, these bumps might be causing a few problems. With some hefty bumps around the slower chicanes and the faster chicanes as well, so we've got to watch out for that. All drivers are going to watch out for that. So Bogle coming into the pits as well. And we have had some varying strategies as well for race. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the race, but we've had a couple of drivers trying something a little bit different. And I have heard murmurs from some of the drivers that there is got to be very careful with track limits on this track. So don't run too wide and getting unnecessary penalties. So we've got to keep an eye on that all the way through the race. So it is... Martino is in the Barclays. I can't remember what team is in now. That's the Arrows BMW. Michael Stoy, you see on traps in the Brabham BMW. Third we have Salvo Villagio in the Renault. And then the two Lotus drivers are Ely Clark and Bogle in fourth and fifth. So a cheeky toe for Story coming down the back straight. As we see, I think that's Andy D, unfortunately getting a little bit out of shape in that chicane. Couldn't quite collect it up before Michael Story got there. So when you get the first part of that chicane wrong, the Ascari chicane, it can really put you off for the last part of it. So perhaps Michael Story is just on an outlap there. As we see in the background, is that another... that's a Ferrari coming to grief. So let's hope he can get it back to the pits in one piece. There's not far to go. Didn't look like any particular damage. So Ely Clark, personal best in the first sector. 30.7. So we're going to have to keep an eye on Ely Clark. She's perhaps pushing towards the end of this session. See, Schurkamp has come to a halt in the first chicane. As the car is moving, so he's going to be able to get it going again. So Stoy, after that, just missing that Ferrari through the Ascari chicane, is now on a little bit of a faster lap. Could have done with having a personal best in the first sector. You can see those brake discs glowing as he slows down for the Ascari chicane. So Galetti looks like he's popped up to third. And Sal Villagio and Neuenhoff is now popped into sixth place. Oh, in fact, Neuenhoff improves up to fourth place. But still that front row, separated by 0.05 of a second. Galetti is a further 0.5 of a second behind. So another outlap for Martino. Perhaps testing a little bit of a clutch bite point as he comes out the pits. In fact, he's waiting for a little bit of space as well. So remember, cold tyres as you come through that chicane for the first time. But Neuenhoff now in fourth place. He's now first of the Renaults. Slightly wide in that first part of the Ascari and can't gather it up in the next part of the Ascari. Looks like a bit of a handful. But Martino is on his outlap and pushing a bit too hard. I think that's Oliver Day there, just getting out of the way in the Ferrari. So 122.38 is the time to beat. 13th place. Saw a yellow flag for 13th place coming into the Lesmo chicane, and I wondered whether This is a very scruffy outlap for Martino. I wonder if he's trying something a little different. Or perhaps his tyres are not warming up on his outlap, making it extra difficult. We've got just over 7 minutes to go. So locking up into the parabolica is not going to help his outlap, and running a little bit wide as well. So I wonder if he's tried something a little bit different. And having a few problems. Also seeing on the map as well. That's Muller that's had a bit of a problem. That's just coming out of the Rettifiglio into the curve. Grando is knocked off the front wing. He's got the majority of the map, the lap to do without a front wing, so hopefully he can stay out of the way of some of the faster drivers. He should be able to get back to the pits, get that wing put on, and come out for another go. So after that scruffy out lap, still missing a few apexes, and you see Willer in the background struggling to get it slowed down for the first Lesmo. So down the back straight. That is a Tyrrell. That's possibly the Tyrrell of Rosa, I believe, because Schuerkamp's in the pits at the moment. So I wonder what happened to Rosa. Strange place to lose it, unless he clipped the curb on the inside of what is the Seraglio. That is how I'm pronouncing it. I'm sure there's a better Seraglio. Yeah. It's a slight curve to the left hand side just before you come under the banking. It's not really a curve at all. And I believe that still more problems for Rosa in that Tyrrell. Ferrari in the background, I believe that's possibly Oliver Day. So Story coming down to the Parabolica. So purple sector in sector 1, 30.3. Personal best in the second sector, 26.0. So what can he do? Cheeky toe off that Ferrari in front. Story goes in provisional pole by 0.5 of a second, so he was able to find something in that middle sector. So maybe that little bit of a toe from that Ferrari in front maybe helped in that final sector to grab those vital extra tenths to grab provisional pole. So we got a full field today. 14 drivers on the track. It's wonderful to see these drivers really relishing these cars on these historic tracks. So just over 4 minutes to go. Possibly able to get about 2 or 3 more laps in. So Story has now moved the benchmark away from Martino. Martino's still on the front row. So half a second gap to second place, then half a second again to third. So big gaps between the first 3. A couple of drivers out on the off track there. I think they're possibly checking for clutch bite points. We have had a few instances in this season so far where drivers have just not got away from the line, bogged down very, very quickly. We've also had some instances of some engines overheating. We've had a couple of engine blow-ups. We've also had some engines smoking off the line as well. Some drivers pushing the engines a bit too much on the formation lap, I feel. So Story out for another go. Thinks he can do better in the last 3 minutes of qualification. He has a Renault not far behind. I think Wazona is I believe that's possibly Galetti and Salvalaggio. at the first chicane. So Andy D currently in 10th place. Andy D has had some engine failures this season. Second and third round, he had an engine failure. He missed out the fourth, but he was back and managed to get a 5th place. No, an 8th place finish at Hockenheim last round. So hopefully he's solved his engine issues. So Galetti coming down the back straight underneath the banking. Possibly a slight distant tow from that Renault in front. Probably slightly wide from the apex in that first part of the Redfiglio chicane. Down the back straight he comes. So this looks like it's possibly an outlap or an inlap. I think that's Bogle just behind. So it moves to the inside as quickly as he can to get out of the way. That was Ely Clark. The distinctive wiggle of Ely Clark's car. I don't know whether that's latency or just how maybe stiff she has the car. So championship leader at the moment down in 5th place, which is a bit unusual. This should shake the championship up a little. So, coming down to final minute of qualification. Michael Stoy, perhaps, if he can get to the line, he's only got just over 30 seconds to go. He should be able to make it for another lap, I think. Or might just miss out. So, the dying seconds of qualification. So 14th place of Muller is going to get across the line for another lap. Now it's going to be very close for Story. 15 seconds. So he just gets over the line for another lap with 10 seconds to go. So this will be the last lap for Ely Clark. Coming down the back straight, there's possibly an in-lap. Because he's setting the timesheets alight. And very loose out the final corner. Trying to step on that throttle as much as possible. Knocking the front wing off. So that car always looks a little bit out of shape. So it doesn't look like Story is pushing. So possibly is mistaking the first sector there, which has meant that that is the challenge done. He has thrown down the gauntlet. It looks like the rest of the drivers from down to 8th place are in the pitch, so that's possibly what he saw on the tower. So there's no further improvement that could be made. So that is pole position for Michael Stoy. So joint leader in the championship sets down a marker. A mark of intention. He wants this championship. So last round he did have a slight problem, but was able to fight his way back up to 4th place. I think I remember reading that he had a few problems at Hockenheim. So the last person on the track was Rosa. Did pop up to 7th place in the dying seconds of that qualification session. But we have our order. We have our drivers completed their qualification session. So let's switch over and give you the official qualification results. So set the starting order. I will get it. So Michael Stoyer comes away with pole position. Vito Martino on the front row with him. Gillespie in 3rd and Neuenhoff in 4th. Ely Clark, slightly down on what she's usually able to compete in 5th, Sal Valeggio in 6th, Rosa in 7th, Matthias Bogle in 8th, with Andy Schremser 9th, Andy D in 10th, Schuerkamp in 11th, Bolveg in 12th. Then we have our last row on the grid, Oliver Day coming back from a sabbatical, and Josef Müller last placed 14th. So there is your grid for today's race. Now a reminder that this is the penultimate round of this championship. We are heading to Adelaide in about a month's time on the 8th of June. Now, looking at the point standings, it is 66 points apiece for Ely Clark and Michael Stoy. Unless something dramatic happens in this race, because drivers do need to complete 50% of the laps in order to score points today, so points are all the way down to 12th place. So 24 wins, 16 for second, 14 for third. Something dramatic would really have to happen in this race for the championship to be decided, but stranger things have happened. So our drivers just out for a warm-up. So we can see a few drivers out in warm-up. So this is the F1 1984 Masters Championship with SimRacers Revival. Join us here at Monza for what is the penultimate round. I think probably the quickest circuit on the calendar so far. We have been all around the globe. So our drivers will be taking a formation lap and then a standing start. So drivers have the opportunity to warm their tyres, warm their brakes. A few people on the back straight trying a clutch start. They want to get away from the line. As I said before, there's been a couple of drivers that have really struggled to get the clutch bite point perfectly down. We'll see whether that has improved. So just a couple of minutes left of warm-up, and then we'll be heading to the race for what is going to be a very interesting race. So 42 laps around the Temple of Speed. Should be a very exciting race from my point of view anyway. So Monza, very famous circuit. It's currently used for Formula 1. Has been used for Formula 1 since 1950 up until the present day. It only missed out the 1980 Grand Prix. It also the GT World Challenge takes place at this circuit since about 2013. But other series that have taken place here, we have had the WEC, the World Endurance Championship, with the 6 hours of Monza. The Motorcycle Grand Prix also. We also had the World Superbikes and the Touring Car World Tour, along with the WTEC, the World Touring Car Race of Italy. So, a number of races around the circuit, a number of series around the circuit rather. So the layout we're using is the 1979 to 1993 high curbs around this circuit. I'm just looking at some of the... It's 1976 to 93, 5.8 kilometers, 3.6 miles, 14 turns. The lap record around this circuit was made by Damon Hill in the FW15C in 1993, over 123.57. So we've slightly beaten that in these 1984 cars. I think that's possibly Galetti. And McLaren having a little bit of an off through the second Lesmo there. So a reminder, if you haven't joined us before, I am doing this commentary with automatic cameras, so the game does pick the camera angles for me, but it does mean that I can manually change them at any point in time, but the director normally overrules my decision, so I can sometimes pick some of the action if the director doesn't find it, but it normally does.
Attention grid, all non-essential personnel leave the grid now.
Right, time to grid up. As I say, there's going to be a formation lap, so drivers do have the opportunity to warm their tyres and brakes. Now drivers have got to be very careful of not overheating their engine. We have seen a few overheating engines on the line, but the smoke does die down a bit as the opening laps do get completed. But 14 drivers, 2 by 2 on the line. Maybe a couple of drivers staying in the pits a bit longer. Last setup tweaks, although you don't. Do you really want to tweak any of the setup just before you go to the race? That's sometimes the last thing you want to do. I've made a few mistakes doing that myself, where you tweak the setup and you kind of think, yes, I'm going to change this, this, and this, and you haven't tested it, and it can lead to some problems. So Stoy is going to lead them away with Martino in second. So 42 laps around the Temple of Speed, and I think I'll grab this opportunity to take a little bit of a breath and a little bit of a drink, because I think it's going to be fast and furious stuff. So, drivers just warming up. Don't see any particular weaving. So, drivers have possibly learnt from the first 5 races of this season. Possibly don't want to be too vigorous with your tyre warm-up. Drivers taking it a little bit easier. Not seeing any smoking engines, which is good to see. So a reminder that our drivers do have the ability to turn up their engine power, turn up the turbo power up and down. But what I forgot to mention in the intro was that during 1984, it was the battle between the naturally aspirated engines and the turbos. I seem to remember that the Tyrrells were one of the teams that hung on to the naturally aspirated engine. They perhaps didn't have the budget for a turbo and stuck with the naturally aspirated. I wonder if that's going to hurt them. We do have 2 Tyrrells in this race currently. May hurt them on the straights, of which we have possibly, I would say, about 4. So we have the front straight, and then we have the straight coming out of the Curve Grand, which is technically the second, third corner perhaps. And then we have out of the second Lesmo down the back straight, a slight curve to the left, underneath the banking, then through the Ascari chicane, along the back straight up towards the Parabolica, of which they are coming out now. And then heading onto the main straight. So if you can stay under someone's rear wing coming out the Parabolica, you will do well for a slingshot move down into turns 1 for the Rettifilio chicane. So drivers weaving a little coming up to the line, slowing it down and picking where their grid spot is. It's a very tightly packed grid, but hopefully everyone is able to get through the first chicane unscathed. Like Hockenheim, we had a few problems down in the first chicane at Hockenheim, but 42 laps around Monza. So away they go. The top 4 did not get away, and it looks like Becky Ely Clark is going to come through from 5th, squeezing through into 3rd place. That's a driver speared off to the left-hand side. I'm not sure who that was. So Martino is completely cut the chicane there. Got it completely wrong. And has actually gained a little bit of an advantage. So stewards may want to have a look at that. So down into the chicane for the first time. The Rogier chicane. Ely Clark from 5th up to 2nd place. Neuenhoff 3rd. Salvalaggio in 4th. So we are seeing that Martino is dropping back a little. And we did see a couple of drivers that unfortunately came to grief. I'm not sure who that was in the opening lap. And we are seeing out the back Oliver Day. Maybe Oliver Day was the driver that speared to one side. Borveg having a look up the inside of Andy D, who runs wide. So tyres, some cold tyres. We're seeing Schuerkamp, I think, has come to grief in the Ascari chicane. So Schuerkamp and Rosa, that's Salvalaggio gone around. So a lot of drivers failing on cold tyres at the moment. Needs to get out of that gravel as soon as possible, and rejoins in about 9th place. So Borveg right behind Andy D down the main straight for the 2nd lap. But out front Martino and Ely Clark, with Neuenhoff in 3rd. Bogle now up to 4th. Schremser, great start, up to 5th as well. But a number of yellow flags. I think drivers getting very caught out with their tyre warm-up through those first few chicanes. But we've settled down a little. But Borveg now up to 7th place. 6th place Andy D. Borveg perhaps scared himself into that chicane. Didn't think he was going to slow down. I believe it's Stoy that got knocked down the order. So from pole down to 7th place. So Stoy really struggled to get off the line and got absolutely swamped in that first chicane. And is having to do the fight back of his life if he wants to take this championship. So Stoy now overtaking that Ferrari of Andy D ahead, now up to 6th place. So the gap of the leader, Martino, 1.1 second to Ely Clark, with Neuenhoff 1.6 seconds behind. So looking at positions gained, the biggest, looking down the order, biggest winner was perhaps Bogle and Schremser, gaining 4 places. Biggest loser in the first few laps was Michael Stoy, dropping down 5 places. Giletti, in fact, right down in 14th, dropping 11 places. So perhaps he was one of the drivers. He was on the 2nd row, so he may have had some problems in the opening laps. So Oliver Day now back out on track in 11th place, chasing Josef Müller in that Benetton ahead. But Ely Clark now has settled down, and the gap to the leader is coming down. It's now 0.9 of a second. So Ely Clark leading the championship with Martino currently in 3rd in the championship. That looks like perhaps the Williams of Borveg going slightly wide coming out the first chicane, heading into the Lesmo. And Salvalaggio having to fight back from that earlier incident down into the Parabolica. So Borveg hoping to have a drafting partner of that Renault ahead, so he can possibly catch up. Need to be within about 0.6 of a second to get the wisp of draft. Becky Ely Clark putting in the fastest lap of the race so far, so kicking on. And you've got 2 or 3 wide down into the Parabolica, as Rosa is trying to fight back after that incident into Ascari. Getting the entry a bit slower, and means he's possibly going to be looking for a Ferrari in the mirror. Up the main straight they come up towards the first chicane. Tyrrell dives down the inside of Muller. Feels like he doesn't quite have the braking capability of that Benetton ahead. I thought he was going to outbrake himself, but he pulled back in and we give it another go at the next chicane. So Ely Clark now 0.74 of a second. So the gap's coming down for the lead. We have seen when Ely Clark has won races this season, she has led and pulled away. So she managed to win a round at Monaco and also the last round at Hockenheim. So Rosa in a gaggle of cars, followed by Oliver Day in the Ferrari. So this is 9th place. All the way down to, I believe, 13th, nose to tail. So the Benetton right behind that Tyrrell. And also Bogle and Schremser having a battle for 4th and 5th. Down to the first chicane they come. So popping over those curbs, not taking big chunks of them this time. But Schremser's able to stay in the rear wheel tracks of the Lotus Renault in front. So well matched Bogle and Schremser. Now that it's all sorted out, the lead has dropped back a little. So Bogle getting it up on 2 wheels coming out the second chicane and not quite judging the speed. It looked like Schremser gained so much when the turbo kicked in. So you see how much that Schremser is gaining in the wheel tracks of Bogle, but not able to use that power until they come down the straight. So you see the Brabham BMW of Stoy just behind this group, working his way back up the field. Borvag looks like he's gone wide and he's in the gravel at Parabolica. I'm staying with this battle. So Stoy doesn't have fancy a chance up turn 1. Schremser doesn't make a mistake. But hoping to show himself in the mirrors, so perhaps putting Schremser off. Now is the opportunity to open up the throttle, get in that slipstream. I don't know about you, but that was a jump scare for me. I nearly leapt out my chair just then. The closing speed between that BMW when the turbo kicked in was a bit of a shock. So drivers are having to be very, very careful when the turbo lag suddenly kicks in. So maybe a few drivers are running their engines quite hot in the first part of this race, trying to make up for lost time. So Stoy now up to 5th place. He was on pole but had a shocking first 2 laps and is having to work his way back up the field. So 13th place of Josef Müller goes wide at the first chicane, but has managed to get going again. Again, Stoy gaining a lot of speed on the straight, so perhaps he's turned his engine fully up. Let's hope he's got the fuel to burn. So before we do our pit stops, let's see what kind of tyres people are taking. So Bogle has decided to take the softer tyres. Schremser is on the harder tyres. So will we see drivers perhaps going long? We did see a couple of drivers deciding to no stop these races, and it worked out for, I believe it was Nieuwenhof that nearly won at Silverstone, although he was chased down by Martino in the closing stages, but he decided to no stop the race. 13th place off Muller is caught at the first Lesmo chicane, or first Lesmo corner. He has got going again, but our first DNF of the race. We did see Borveg going slightly slower. So 14th place Borveg will score no points this round as our first DNF. So Schremser has now got Bogle ahead again. He caught up before, so he should be able to catch up again. But the gap at the front is waxing and waning, so it's 1.7 seconds between Martino and Ely Clark. Now Ely Clark could play it a bit safe here. Not overheat the engine, turn it down a little bit, run her pace, in second place. Nieuwenhof is not really a threat behind. So Nieuwenhof an extra 5 seconds behind Ely Clark. But we do have Stoy on his comeback drive, currently in 4th place. And then we have Oliver Day coming back to the series in the Ferrari, chasing Galetti, who had an absolute shocker at the start of this race. I believe he started on the 3rd row, 2nd or 3rd row. I believe it was the 2nd row. But Stoy putting in the fastest lap of the race, 1:26.1. So pushing on, turning up that engine, pushing on in the first part of this race, having to push. So he hasn't had it all his own way at the start of this race. So it's a shame. But we saw the top 4 not being able to get away from the line. So that practice with the clutch bite points of these cars, they die quite easily or bog down quite easily, but Becky Ely Clark got it absolutely hooked up and came from the 3rd row of the grid all the way through to 2nd place. So massive start for Ely Clark, and needs the points for her championship as well. So currently leading, or joint leading, the championship. So 8 laps down of 42 is a long way to go for these drivers. So is it too early to talk about strategy? I think that a lot of drivers have been cutting these races in half, so 21 laps will be the cut-off point for a one-stopper. But as we've seen, there is a driver that has decided to go for soft tyres, so I'm wondering whether Bogle is ahead of Schremser. Is perhaps thinking of doing a 2-stopper. Can he work those soft tyres in to do a 1-stop? I believe it is possible to mix tyre compounds, so you can do soft compounds in one stint and then mediums in another. But we'll have to see. So Rosa now chasing Andy D for 8th and 9th place, so the naturally aspirated Tyrrell just behind the Ferrari. Seems to be catching as well. So even though we had incidents at the beginning of this race, I didn't see any cars going around without wings on them, so a lot of the drivers may have went off, but they didn't hit anything solid, which is good to see. Everyone has kept going. So you can see in the background that ATS, that yellow and black ATS of Galetti on his fight back drive. Unfortunately, he's only made 1 place, and slight lock of the rear brakes. Looks like Rosa got it all wrong coming into Ascari. That means that Galetti's licking his lips. Thinking, I'll have that. But Michael Stoy, another fastest lap of the race, 1:26.1, so coming down a little. So Ely Clark has decided perhaps to push a little more. Slightly bad lap for Martino. 1:28.3, so perhaps a few mistakes from Martino creeping in. Ely Clark bouncing over those curbs, getting a little bit out of shape. So, as I said, Galetti closing in on Rosa after Rosa's mistake coming out of into the Ascari chicane. So we know from Galetti's qualification that he's got the speed. So Oliver Day decides to pit. I don't know if that's for damage. That is a very early pit stop with 10 laps gone. So Rosa, after his mistake, he does seem to have the speed of this Ferrari ahead, but he just needs to be able to pick the right place. But this is the 3-way battle for 8th, 9th and 10th. So Oliver Day is out the pits again. So Rosa now curing the demons that he had last lap. He was able to overtake at the corner that he had a slight problem. So it was, perhaps Andy D was slightly slower into the chicane. I'm seeing a few people drop down the order. So perhaps some timing problems between 6th and 7th there, because they are not close on the track and their positions keep swapping around. So that's going to keep me on my toes. So Ely Clark is now within a second. Putting Martino a little bit under pressure. Perhaps lapped cars are now coming into play. I'm seeing a couple of lap cars on the track. So perhaps catching a lap car in the wrong place. Galetti is now past Andy D for 9th place. But Andy D is able to stay in the wheel tracks of Galetti. ATS BMW is able to pull that Ferrari along. So it looks like that the slipstream effect is really strong here if you can just keep with the driver ahead. That's the hard part. There is a little bit of aero wash. You can see that Andy D struggling to stay with Galetti, coming through a couple of Lesmos and getting dropped by a little bit, but Galetti ahead is now got Rosa to overtake. So Stoy on his fight back is now 125.6 fastest lap of the race. Galetti is able to close up in the last part of the lap, possibly going to overtake Rosa coming out to the Parabolica. So there is a little bit of a different speed of these drivers. I'm wondering whether there's differing turbo levels, because we have seen a couple of scary moments where the turbo was kicked in when some drivers are directly behind others, and it's caught me out when we were on board. I can't think of what kind of jump scare it's given our drivers. So I just saw Bogle drop down the order there to 7th place. I don't know if that's a timing issue. And Rosa goes around, gets it all wrong in the second chicane. So Rosa seemingly having some problems getting that car slowed down, possibly locking the rears. So the two Renaults of Salvalaggio and Neuenhoff, 5th and 6th respectively, with 30 laps to go. Now they are technically teammates on track, but I don't think they are teammates in the real world. But the two Renaults line astern. So Neuenhoff with the blue flashes on the rear wing and Salvalaggio with the red flashes on the rear wing. It's a Renault drafting pattern. So gap for the lead, still going up and down. Is that Galetti? Just, I think that might be Galetti that was in the gravel there. So Galetti putting all those passes in and comes to grief in the Parabolica, so he's got to do all that work again. So his bad Italian Grand Prix goes from bad to worse. Starting on the second row and ending up near down the end of the field. It's decided to pit from 10th place. So Neuenhoff does have a bit more speed than Salvalaggio, it looks like. Maybe deciding this is the time to push, turn up that engine. So slightly closer this time. So we're coming through the Ascari chicane. Can Neuenhoff stay under the rear wing of Salvalaggio ahead? Another fastest lap for Michael Stoy, 125.6. So the comeback is still on. So out of the final corner, Neuenhoff gets a run. I don't know if he's close enough to have a go into turn 1. It looks like these Renault drivers are quite equally matched as Neuenhoff does pull out. Maybe trying to put off Salvalaggio. Trying to get him to make a mistake to what is some of these tighter chicanes. Gets a good exit coming through the out of the chicane. Tries to stick with him through the next turn, but up to the Rogier chicane. So really close into the first Lesmo. Car ahead missing the apex by quite some margin. Into the second. So slight lift into the second. Don't run wide. Otherwise it will possibly take you to the barrier. Slight curve and under the banking they go. So Neuenhoff does have the pace. It looks like on the tower. I'm seeing Bogle as that's a retirement for Bogle. So we didn't see that on screen, so I wonder what happened to Bogle. That is unfortunate. He was in the top 6. Top 7, so something must have catastrophically happened to Bogle. We'll possibly find out for the next round what it was. Bogle has had a few problems in this season so far. We've had a couple of retirements. So Bogle, 2 10th places from the last time. Rosa again having a fabulous battle with Andy D. So that means that all of the drivers on the track at the moment, if they can possibly keep going until 50% distance. So Andy D taking a very tight line, having to go a little bit defensive, but Rosa did have the inside line for the first chicane, but didn't quite feel comfortable enough or confident enough to have a go. So 11th place of Galetti again has come to grief. Maybe cold tyres this time. So Andy D now. Andy D in 7th place. Rosa in 8th. And just spotted that Ely Clark is now in 3rd place with 11 seconds down in 3rd. So something happened to Ely Clark as Neuenhoff gets his braking all wrong. Don't hit anything solid. He does. He's kept it going. No, he didn't. Stalled it, but Ely Clark coming into the pits. I wonder if this is for damage repair. So could it have been a problem with Ely Clark and Bogle? We'll find out after the race, but Ely Clark was complaining a little bit about handling in the number of these races. The car always looking for, or looking on the edge of crashing. So Ely Clark now out of the pits. So lap 16 of 42. So a very quick damage repair if it was for damage. 2nd place down to 6th. Now Stoy up to 2nd place from that horrendous start. But he has had to use a lot of fuel to get there. 3.2 seconds off the lead, so he possibly does have the pace to pass Martino. So let's see if that 4-second gap between the 1st and 2nd can come down. Rosa going and gaining on the Ferrari. This seems to be his favourite place to pass, and I've seen this before. I'm getting deja vu. Hasn't this happened before? So Rosa has again passed Andy D in the Ferrari, but Andy D gaining on the straight. Is he going to have a go up to the Parabolica? He goes to the inside, but not quite the overlap. So these two are very well matched. This is still 4 points. Rosa going very wide outside the Parabolica. And Andy D goes through again. This is a fabulous battle. Now for 6th and 7th place. Rosa is able to push that Tyrrell a bit further than the Ferrari in front. So it looks like maybe a missed gear shift for Andy D coming out of that chicane. And Rosa is through again. This is absolutely fabulous battle. So Andy D thinks about going up to the inside into the Rogier chicane, but that means he's very slow on the exit. Can't get the power down. So this may be for 6th and 7th place, and it might not be championship deciding, but it's a fabulous battle. So we're hearing that Becky did get tangled up with another car, so it would be, if it was with her so-called teammate or similar car teammate, Matthias Bogle, then that would be unfortunate, but the fight back begins, so that may have changed Becky's strategy a little. But we'll have to see what all the other drivers are going to do. So it looks like Schremser in 4th place has come to a stop in the first chicane. Indeed he does, but he's going again, so pushing on. So Schremser in a good position in 4th place. Getting his braking slightly wrong for the first chicane. And looking at that front wing, doesn't look like he hit anything solid. But who is that in the background? That is Ely Clark after her pit stop. And again, getting it all wrong on the brakes, and Ely Clark says thank you very much. That will do nicely. So no problems getting past Andy Schremser in the end. So I wonder whether Schremser is suffering from either overheating tyres or perhaps some bad handling after 19 laps in this race. That doesn't bode well for the rest. So Schremser now down to 5th place. Clark back up to 4th. So after 19 laps, Martino still leads. This will do wonders for his championship chances. So possibly the championship lead is going to change hands. I don't want to jinx it at all. So here we've only seen Martino. We haven't seen a lot of Martino. He's normally been the chased in this race. Michael Stoy now has dropped that gap to 2.7 seconds. With Salvalaggio in 3rd. 29 seconds down the road, so the top 2 are away. It's the battle for the rest of the field I'm interested in at the moment, really. So Salvalaggio is now going to hopefully put onto the back of Stoy, but that's a hell of a gap with 29 seconds between 2nd and 3rd, so he may be in a pit stop in there. Don't normally see, or it's not reliable enough to tell me about pit stops. So Ely Clark on that tower does say she's taken a pit stop along with Oliver Day, and Galetti has taken 2 pit stops, with Miller has taken 1. But I can't always trust that graphic, it's not always reliable. So, look who it is, it's Stoy on his fight back. And Martino goes round. So, just as we saw a couple of laps before, Ely Clark went through on Schremser, and Martino had exactly the same kind of spin. So, I don't know if he took too much curb on the inside there, or perhaps locked the rears coming into the first part of the Roger chicane, but that means that Michael Stoy is now through to the lead. Now, after her pit stop, Becky Ely Clark putting in the fastest lap of the race. 25.48. Slight spin for Josef Müller. I'm seeing Schremser has gone around the first chicane again. Schremser is having all sorts of problems, which means he's now down another place, and Rosa now up to 5th now. It was the fastest lap of the race, but Neuenhoff in 8th has now taken that mantle on 25.0, so times are coming down. So possibly Neuenhoff has been into the pits. Or saying that, Neuenhoff did have that problem at the Parabolica. So he's making up for lost time. So that fabulous battle between Andy D and Rosa. Rosa's been able to pull out that gap. Andy D now catching Andy Schremser after Schremser's few problems. Zach Galetti in the background again. I believe that might be Galetti, but I think Galetti's a lap down from the car ahead. Gosh, that till looked like it was all out of shape in Curve Grande there. Oliver Day now up to 9th place. So Oliver Day, unfortunately I mentioned his name, he's now got a penalty. I suppose that may be for track limits. Did hear that track limits are pretty strict here. So Michael Stoy now pulled out a 5.7 gap. So that spin from Martino. So Rosa, now after those few problems and that fabulous battle with Andy D, is now up to 5th place and pushing on in that Tyrrell. Now that's possibly Schuerkamp, due to be lapped by Sal Villagio. So taking a big bite of that curb for Oliver Day. So Stoy now pushing on in the lead. He's now pulled out 6-second gap, so it's all working out brilliantly for the Brabham. So Ferrari going very wide in the background there. Hopefully he doesn't get pinged with track limits. But now Schremser, 6th place. Galetti in 11th, about to be lapped by a Renault driver. I can never remember which one it is. I think it's Neuenhoff with the blue. So Andy D now in 8th. Really troubled behind, 30 seconds gap to the next 9th place. So Stoy comes in the pits, so around about half distance. 22 laps gone. So the early pit stop of Becky Ely Clark on lap 16. So it is a pretty short pit stop here if it's only for tyres, and Stoy is already out. So the leader comes out of the pits as 2nd place comes into the pits. So that's worked out pretty well for Michael Stoy, and he's out in front of traffic as well. Clear track in front of him. Didn't manage to get caught up in the behind that Ferrari. So that worked out perfectly. Schuerkamp is now in the pits as well. So a flurry of activity with half distance coming around. So Ely Clark now up to 3rd. But 28 seconds behind the leader. Sal Villagio now in the pits. And Schuerkamp just coming out the pits as well. Sal Villagio rejoins in 5th place. With Schremser just coming up behind him. So Ely Clark now back up to 3rd. But she's got take these tyres quite a long way. Probably longer than any of her other drivers, because she was the earliest to pit on lap 16. But will we see any drivers? No stopping. So the first 3 drivers, in fact, we've seen Rosa come into the pits as well, but the first 3 for definite have been into the pits. Stoy and Martino pitting at half distance, but Ely Clark having to pit for damage on lap 16. So Galetti now unlapping himself from Schremser, who pulls to the inside. No, not worth fighting. So down to the Ascari. Schremser does look like a lot of understeer coming into those turns and not able to get the power down as much as he would want to. But Sal Villagio, after that pit stop, still very close to his Renault teammate. He's not far behind Neuenhoff in 6th. He's only 3.9 seconds behind. So after pit stops, they're still close together. But Stoy pushing on. Joint championship leader at the moment. And probably provisional championship leader, maybe when this kicks down. So Rosa now comes into the pits. So Rosa has come into the pits and come out, and he is just behind Andy D. So 7th and 8th, is it going to be the battle again between Andy D and Rosa in the Tyrrell? Okay, so looking at last lap time, so the top 3. So Stoy is in the 125 flat. Just put the fastest lap of the race in. Martino, 126.9 last time around. So perhaps struggling a little to get these tyres warmed up. And as I said that, it made me eat my words. Fastest lap of the race, 124.8 from Martino. So it's not over yet, but still that's a 19.9 second gap to the leader. So possibly ruining that mistake out the Rogier chicane. But still good points for second place. It doesn't matter how far behind you are. It's still a good 16 points for second place. 20 points for a win. So Stoy kicking on. Now it's Nieuwenhof's turn to put in the fastest lap of the race, 124.5. So we are getting closer down to qualification times here with 25 laps gone, or 42. Now usually in these races I normally say that there's a little bit of a lull in the middle of the races and then it kicks off near the end. But we've had action all the way through here. Monza has provided some great racing. I guess the combination of slower chicanes and many straights to draft. So look who it is. It's Rosa and Andy D set to do battle once again as Oliver Day comes into the pits and out again. Martino, another fastest lap of the race, coming thick and fast, 124.3. So you have to wonder whether Ely Clark, after that first stop, is perhaps thinking, well, maybe I should knock it down a little. She's got a big gap between third and fourth. As we see, Rosa passes in his favourite place to pass. He seems to gain on Andy D in particular, coming into the Ascari chicane. Now, can he stay in front? He was in front in the pit stops. Perhaps a little bit of damage he had to fix in the pit stop, which made him drop behind Andy D again. So Rosa's probably thinking, I've seen this Ferrari so many times, but now he's passed and perhaps he can pull away from Andy D. So I've seen that Andy D has struggled to get the power down out of some of these chicanes. So maybe that is a little bit of turbo lag with the Ferrari. But the Tyrrell of Rosa doesn't really have that problem using a naturally aspirated engine. Schuerkamp just behind Galetti. Closest battle on the track at the moment between 11th and 10th. So Galetti was all set for a top 5 finish. Unfortunately, something happened at the start and it meant he dropped 11 places. And he's been around about the top 10 for much of this race. He's had a few problems as well. A couple of spins. Means he's now a lap down on the rest of the field. But still points all the way down to 12th place in this championship. So Rosa is now up to the back of Schremser again. It's Groundhog Day for Rosa. Passing this McLaren once again. Now, where is he faster than this McLaren? We have seen the chosen place is into the Ascari chicane. So can he stay under the rear wing all the way up to the Ascari and possibly pull out? Passing into, he does gain a lot coming around the Curva Grande. Looks like some of these cars are really struggling to get out of these slow corners. Into the Rogier chicane they come. Right, stay with him coming out of the Rogier chicane. He's up the inside. Schremser stays wide into the first Lesmo. There was a little bit of space there. That was brave and very well held by both those drivers. So coming up to the favourite passing place, he gains such a lot of pace on the back straight. He's able to pass just before the braking zone. So again, this is I think the third pass that Rosa has made up to the Ascari chicane. back up to 6th place. So 28 laps gone. Stoy leads, Martino second, Ely Clark third, Salvalaggio in 4th, and Neuenhoff in 5th. So the battle I'm seeing on the tower is set to resume between Salvalaggio and Neuenhoff in 4th and 5th. After pit stops, that gap is coming down. Neuenhoff is 1.7 seconds behind Salvalaggio in 4th. So Rosa possibly able to pull away from Schremser in the McLaren. So it'd be a good finish for Rosa. Looking back on my cheat sheet. Rosa currently 11th in the championship. Has taken part in all 5 rounds so far, but unfortunately the first 2 rounds he had engine failures. He's only been able to finish the 3rd round, which was at Monaco. He had a 4th place, so stunning finish. But suspension failures in the last 2 rounds, so that would say to me that was perhaps accidents or collisions with solid objects. So the director at the moment likes Schremser, but we're going to look at the leader, Michael Stoy. In fact, the director overruled me and wants to look at Rosa instead. So Rosa now in front of Schremser and starts to pull away, but Oliver Day and Josef Müller are having a battle back in 9th and 10th. So Ferrari versus Benetton. And Michael Stoy out front. Comfortable it seems now. Let's have a look at the tyres. It does look like Schremser is on the harder tyre, so perhaps struggling to get out those slower corners. Getting the rubber down to the road is the hardest part for those harder tyres. I'm not sure we've actually seen Schremser come into the pits. Is Schremser deciding to do a no stopper? I'm not so sure. We're back to the battle between 11th and 12th. So Josef Müller now in the wheel tracks. Well, in fact, that is Ely Clark. So slight problem dropping Müller back. Story kicking on in first place. The gap now up to 24 seconds. Ely Clark still only 8.9 seconds away from second place, so the early leader Martino and early second place Ely Clark. Galetti is coming into the pits from 10th place. Wondering if the torrid day for Galetti has just got worse. He seems to be in the pits a number of times. And out he comes again. I haven't seen any penalties pop up on the screen, so I'm wondering what kind of problems Galetti is having. So Schumacher now in the top 10. 42 seconds behind 9th place of Oliver Day. So 31 laps of 42, nearly down to 10 laps to go. It's been fast and furious action at Monza. So Oliver Day going slightly wide, seeing Ely Clark in the mirrors. Pulls to the inside, lets her through. So a characteristic of these cars in this era, lots of power, not a lot of downforce, but heaps of turbo lag. So Formula 1 went through an era of trying out turbos. I think they started in about 1981 with Renault. Turbos were very unreliable when they started, but they became the thing to have in your car. I think when they started with turbos, particularly I was when I was watching back some of the older races, some of the drivers were a bit miffed that they didn't have full control over the turbo level. No way to switch it in the cockpit, so it was either, you know, the only way to manage it was your left foot, and you couldn't turn the engine up or down. So 8th place has come to a stop. That's Oliver Day. That is 9th place, Andy D. So again, falling foul of engine problems. So Andy D, again, another engine failure. So Andy D has had 2 engine failures so far this season in round 1 and 2. He did finish in 8th place last time out, but today will be a non-finish. I'm wondering, he did come to it. That's another Ferrari. Is that another Ferrari engine failure? That's Oliver Day pulling to the left-hand side of the track. Just coming out of Curva Grande. We didn't see any flames or smoke. Now it is just on the cusp of 50% half distance. So, 10 laps remaining. So Andy D and Oliver Day within a lap of each other, coming to a stop. Now, I did say that people would be scoring points if they get to 50%. We have only just ticked over for 50%. So, I'm wondering what will happen to the stats for points in this race. So, they're guaranteed 11th and 12th, I believe. But that's cutting it a bit fine for points. Unfortunately, Andy D, catastrophic Ferrari engine failure just coming into the Parabolica, and Oliver Day possibly some kind of technical issue. Didn't see any smoking from the rear of that engine. So Stoy now still leads by 28.3 seconds, so it's worked out beautifully for Stoy. He's had to fight back from about 7th place or so. So I wonder how many drivers saw that Ferrari on fire, and it's maybe changed how they're thinking about engine management. I know if I saw a car on fire, it would make me think twice about hitting that red line. So Tyrrell just letting Michael Stoy by it now. Salvalaggio, look in the mirrors, Salvalaggio. That's Neuenhoff right behind you. So battle is resumed from before the pit stops. Those 2 Renaults are together again. Now Stoy could possibly, for the last 9 laps, turn the engine down. But Ely Clark is not shutting off. So, oh, that is a penalty for Ely Clark. So that's track limits. We saw taking far too much curb in that first chicane. So Ely Clark, this is going to be disastrous for points in this race. She's possibly going to lose 2 places because she's going to have to come in for a drive-through penalty. She has 15 seconds to Salvalaggio in 4th. Ganetti puts in the fastest lap of the race after coming into the pits, 1:23.9, so he had the speed today. He just did not have the ability to keep things clean in the first part of this race. All kinds of problems dropped him down the order, so what could have been? So 8th place currently for Galetti. As if by magic, the director heard what I was talking about. So perhaps after those pit stops and the car being a bit lighter, the car is deciding to match. So Ely Clark, stop and go for Ely Clark. So it wasn't just... She's actually going to get out just in front of this battle for 4th and 5th, so didn't lose a place in the end. So now Salvalaggio with a mirror full of Nieuwenhof. So lucky for Ely Clark, she did have that gap to 4th and 5th, which possibly saved her dropping a place, but she's going to have to be very careful with track limits. So I don't know whether possibly if you've received a penalty for track limits before, it might raise that penalty to a disqualification. So she's got to be very, very careful. But the only thing working into her advantage is these two Renaults are going to be battling behind, and possibly slowing each other down. And she possibly does have the pace to stay ahead of them. But they are in the 124s, 125s. So currently 10 runners in this race so far. I believe we are going to score down to 12th place. Unfortunately, those two Ferraris in 11th and 12th both look like they may have had engine failures. Stoy now laps Rosso in the Tyrrell. So 36 laps of 42. So very untidy through that first chicane for Salvalaggio. Maybe able to turn the engine up a bit. He's pulling out a little bit of a gap from Nieuwenhof, but Nieuwenhof, this may, that car in front of them, it just depends where these two cars catch this lap car. They may get them on the exit of the turn ahead. So are they able to pass coming down this straight? One Renault may get by. This may held up Nieuwenhof if the Benetton does not see Nieuwenhof behind. Nieuwenhof is not quite close enough coming into the Ascari chicane. So the gap for the lead now up to 30 seconds. So Stoy has played an absolute blinder here. So Nieuwenhof doesn't look like too much time dropped and is able to stay with Salvalaggio, but Salvalaggio has something to say about 3rd place. That is Muller just going off at the Parabolica behind. So slightly wide and sucked straight into the Armco or the tyres at the edge of Parabolica. So Salvalaggio still got that Renault behind, but he's pushing on. So last lap time for Becky Ely Clark, 126.0. Salvalaggio, 125.4. So Ely Clark does have something to worry about for this last step on the podium. But does Nieuwenhof have anything to say about Salvalaggio? So 5 laps remaining. Muller is coming into the pits for the repair. So possibly that knock of the barrier giving some problems, and out he comes again in 10th place. So the gap is coming down between Ely Clark. So I did say sparks would fly just at the end of this race. This is when the director starts moving around the cameras, focusing on the leader, then focusing on the battles. 7th place Schremser is around at the chicane again. So we did see Schremser going around, but he doesn't seem to be under threat. That is 2nd place Martino. Hold your line, Schremser. Martino comes through on the inside. So it's still 7th place for Schremser, so I'm not seeing any damage either. But I want to be worried about the battle between 3rd, 4th and 5th. So Ely Clark. Remember, Ely Clark is possibly on more worn tyres than the two cars behind because she pitted on lap 16. How can she hold off these two Renaults? I mean, if one is coming through, possibly the other one too. So under 5 laps to go. what has these two Renaults got for Ely Clark. So gaining so much speed on that back straight and straight through. So possibly they have the fuel to burn. So Salvalaggio now back up to third place. This possibly means that Nieuwenhof may be through in quick succession. So Nieuwenhof, unfortunately, I was going to say that whether he was alongside or not, but Becky didn't see him in her mirrors, I'm guessing, and closed the door. So that was a bit and a half and half. I'm guessing thought Nieuwenhof was going to make his way through. So both Tyrrells still running. They've been very strong today, particularly in Rosa's hands. The Tyrrell has been very strong coming up to the Ascari. Problems for Salvalaggio. Has oh, and slight problems for Ely Clark. So it looked like spinning up the tyres coming out of that Rogier chicane as she kept it running. I did see the places change between Ely Clark and Salvalaggio, so I think Salvalaggio may have had a problem, which meant that Ely Clark had passed, but it looks like, is this terminal for Ely Clark? This is major championship connotations. So the engine is running. She's got it fired up and away she goes, but she has lost a place to Thomas Rosa. So it was looking good for last step of the podium. Maybe trying a bit too hard out of some of the slower chicanes and can't get the power down cleanly. Around she went. I believe she's actually missing a front wing, but she possibly does have enough time to get it fixed and out. So, championship connotations, I did say. There may be something dramatic happening in this penultimate round. We do have a month to wait until the next round, which is going to be absolute torture. But it does give a lot of our drivers the opportunity to practice at Adelaide, which will be slightly different to the track we're at today. So, slower corners and only one big long back straight. So, one final lap to go. There will be one lap after this. The leader is just coming up to the second sector now. Up into the Lesmo for the penultimate time. So, in fact, Ely Clark does come into the pits. And she will lose a place to Schremser. That's possibly the only place you will lose, because Galetti is way too far behind to overtake. So 7th place at most for Ely Clark, but we've got one final lap for something dramatic to happen. What might have been for Galetti, he had the pace today, put in one of the fastest laps of the race, but no bonus points for that, unfortunately. Schremser would be a great finish to finish it in 6th place. Michael Stoy on his final lap. Dominant showing. He had the pace at the start of the race. Unfortunate problems knocked him down the field, but he's now worked his way back up and is now somehow in the lead. Kind of similar to when we had it at Buenos Aires. He seemed absolutely nowhere, and then he came on strong late on in the race. So, very strong showing. This means that there will be a change in the championship lead. Unfortunately, Ely Clark, with those problems, is going to lose the championship lead. So, Josef Müller, after that accident and that pit stop, just staying out of the way of our leader. He's coming down the back straight for final time into the Ascari chicane for the final time. So Galetti just in front. You wonder whether Galetti will possibly just let... well, he's too far behind. If he let Stoy behind by, then that means he will be finished. But Stoy coming into the Parabolica for the final time. And it's going to come out of this corner. No particular worries. Once he got to the lead, he stayed in the lead. And it's going to come away with the win of the 6th round of the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Stunning drive from Michael Stoy in the Brabham BMW. So we're going to have to wait quite a significant amount of time for the rest of the field to come through. So second place just coming up the back straight now. So Martino, our early leader. Comes out the final corner. Now I'm seeing a yellow flag for Rosa in 5th. It's come to a stop. I'm wondering if Rosa has actually finished. He was. Was he a lap down? I'm unsure. This would be an absolute nightmare for Rosa if he's unfortunately run out of fuel. Or perhaps the engine has seized, but 3rd place comes across the line. Salvalaggio does indeed take 3rd, and Neuenhoff comes home in 4th. So I'm not seeing him drop down the order. So I think perhaps Rosa did manage to get to the end. Schremser's going to come home in 6th, Ely Clark 7th, Galetti in 8th. So Salvalaggio just doing some donuts on the main straight here to celebrate, and getting it all wrong and roasting that Renault engine. Absolutely roasting it. Michael Stoy doing some proper donuts at the end of the straight outside the Parabolica. Very happy with that win, and you can tell, absolutely stoked. Martino, what might have happened, he did lead the start of this race. I wonder whether the stewards are going to have something to say about the completely blasting through the 1st and 2nd chicane. Getting it all wrong, but absolute stunning race from these drivers. They put on a great show all the way up and down the field. Celebration's still going on. No longer need that engine smoking away in the pits. But fantastic driving from all of these drivers. Fantastic. Okay, so the official results are going to be as follows. So if we look at the official results, and then I can total up the scores. So Story comes away with the win. That will be a change in the championship positions, I would have thought. So Martino was 3rd in the championship. Will be 3rd in the championship when we total up the points. Salvalaggio 4th in the championship. Grabs a 3rd at Monza. Neuenhoff 5th in the championship. Grabs a 4th at Monza. Rosa, a stunning finish in 5th. So currently 11th in the championship. This gives him a lot of points. He scored once this season, and this will be his 2nd point score this season. So that's a stunning drive for Rosa. He had a stunning battle with Schremser and Andy D early on in this race. Saying that Schremser comes home in 6th place. Ely Clark, unfortunately, was on the podium in those final few laps, but it all came undone out of the Rogier chicane, stepping on the throttle, and that car just went around. Those Renaults were about to swallow her up, and unfortunately they did, and knocking off a little bit of the wing as well. So 7th on the road for Ely Clark. What might have been for Galetti, and I've said that a number of times for Galetti, he had the pace today, but a bad start meant he had to work his way back up the field. He was around the top 10 and is coming away with 8th. Maybe because of failures from some of the other drivers, but we'll get to that. 9th place for Schuerkamp, who was a little bit anonymous this race. We didn't see a lot of Schuerkamp. And Josef Müller a couple of laps down. We saw that Josef Müller had a number of offs, and we saw him coming off in the last chicane, but he did pit and managed to come home in 10th, so still finished and still get some points. So I'm going to classify our last two finishers, Oliver Day and Andy D. You do need to finish the last, or need to finish 50% of the laps in order to get points in this race. So I'm going to give unofficially Oliver Day and Andy D, who had an apparent engine failure. We saw Andy D completely on fire. So we'll see whether that is official for the next round. So things have changed in the championship. I'm just generating the championship points now, so we'll be able to see what has changed. Going into the final round as well, it makes that month wait even harder, because the, as I say, championship is not finished. Definitely not finished now. So let's generate the points for you, and if I've done everything correctly, you should see our championship standings. So, championship standings are as follows. Michael Stoy is now in the lead of the championship after that win at Monza. Martino still in second. Well, in fact, he jumps from third to second. Ely Clark now drops down to third, but the points lead is now 10 points, 86 to 76. Ely Clark now dropped to 72. Now level on points with Marco Sal of Bellagio. So a battle to be had between third and fourth in the final round. I think Neuenhoff is possibly a bit too far away to be able to challenge the top four. So Neuenhoff with 54 points. Then slightly more adrift is Galetti in 6th on 39. Matthias Bogle having some problems. He will not score this round with 28, so we'll have to find out after the race what happened to Matthias Bogle. Josef Müller did finish this time around. Grabbed himself 3 points with 25, so there's still a play for down the bottom of the table. Schuerkamp not far behind, look, with 24 in 9th place. And our last points finisher in the top 10, 22 points, is Thomas Rosa. Did his championship good? Did his championship chances good in the final round? The penultimate round, rather, with 10 points. So, what an interesting round. What a very interesting championship this has been. I look forward to bringing more to you, but we've got a month's wait until the next one. So if we look at our schedule, so show the post-race schedule, we'll see that Adelaide is our final round. We are set for an absolute showdown. It makes it a little bit easier for Stoy that he has a little bit of a championship lead going into this final round. But we've got to wait until the 8th of June. The 8th of June is a long time to wait for what is going to be a showdown, but a circuit that it seems completely different from anything we've done so far. So we haven't had any street circuits quite like Adelaide. The only street circuit we did do was in round 3 at Monaco, but Adelaide is set to be an absolute stormer, and may it cause a lot more problems, particularly with these cars trying to get through some of the slower turns at Adelaide. So if you know Adelaide, it's very, very tight. The only place that possibly there is a passing opportunity is the back straight, because it might be a bit tight getting through some of the earlier turns, and I'll have to find out what layout we're using. It's possibly going to be the bumpy version, the 1986 version. But will we see any changes in position for the championship? A marker has been put down by Stoy, winning this race by a significant margin today, and we'll have to see whether Martino has anything for him in the final round. And problems for Ely Clark has meant it's dropped her down from the lead of the championship down to third, so but anything can happen in the final round, as is evident from some of these races. But I've been your host, Neil Wood. It's been a pleasure to take you through the SimRacers Revival F1 1984 Championship, and join us here on this channel. Give us a like if you like what you saw, share the video as well, and yeah, we'll see you here for the final round on the 8th of June at about 6:15 UK time. But thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you next time.